What's going on, everybody? Blade55555 here, and today I'm going to be presenting a different kind of guide that I don't know if I've done before, but it's going to be going over how to counter the Malian Fast Castle build. This is a popular build that was created by Zalami. If you play ladder, a lot of players have been doing this lately, and I see a lot of people calling this overpowered, and some saying, some say they're still weak. What I'm going to do is I'm going to be going over a few replays, one of my own. I'm going to be going over a couple others that I can see, and then we're going to go over pretty much how to counter it. I'm just going to show examples. For starters, this first game is me versus some Smurf. He was ranked 70th or something when we played. Last I checked, he's still top 80 or something. Don't know who it is. HRE versus Malians, a matchup that I know some players think is very, very difficult for HRE. And I'm just going to state this for the record. These are just my opinions, not necessarily a fact. But this is what I think you should do versus Malians as HRE, for example. In a previous video, I went over a 2TC with Roos, and that's also what I do against Malians. And in that replay, it is Roos versus Malians. I'm also going to state I don't think my opponents necessarily played 100% correctly, so take that as you will. And so I'm going to go around with the theories of how to, or I'm going to showcase how to beat it or how I've beaten it, and then I'm going to go over theories on how I think you should approach it with other civilizations. So to start off, I am just going to state this as well. My 2TC build I do with HRE in this game is not 100% good. You can get the second TC a lot quicker than I do this game, but the concept is still the same. The way I think you want to approach this matchup as HRE is you want to go for a 2TC build, and then you want to go Archer Knight or Archer Men-at-Arm Knight, just one of the three compositions, because I think you need to go archers, and I'm going to go over why that is, because Malian players are going to do a few things. They're going to go Musafati Warrior if you go Men-at-Arms. They're usually going to go Musafati Warrior even if you go Knights, and they're going to have Donzos for Knights as well. And then they're going to usually go heavy Javelin Throwers. So in this game, my opponent actually doesn't go heavy Javelin Throwers because of how heavy I went on. I went Horseman. I go Horseman, Archer, Land Snakes. I can't say the real name, so I'm just going to go with that. And then added in Knights and had Archers, a lot of Archers as well, which you will see. So, like for example, if my opponent went Javelin, Donzo, then a good composition would be Horseman, Horseman, Men-at-Arm / Land Snakes, and then I think Archers as well to counter. But anyway, enough of just talking about it. I'm going to showcase what I do this game. And again, like I said, I don't think I played this 100% correctly, but then neither do I think my opponent did. But I do think the general concept is how you want to go about it. And so while my opponent does do a fast castle build, it's not as fast as it should be. I think he's a bit delayed because he goes for quick warrior scouts to try to deny this second TC. But again, this is just going to showcase exactly what I think you should do. So I'm going to go 2TC here. And so the reason why I also want to state that this is inefficient is I believe you can get the second TC at about 5 minutes or maybe a little bit later as HRE if you do the proper build. But so the proper concept though is I think you want to go 2 TCs, and I do think you want to get archers pretty early on as well. And then in this game, you're going to see that I'm going to go spearman, and that's because I'm doing against his warrior scouts, and then I go pretty much castle. I also want to state for the record that this video is not going over specific build orders, so I'm not going to go tell you how many villagers I did and then go castle. The concept of this video is to showcase how to combat against this new style of Malian gameplay that has been on the ladder for quite some time, or not, recently. And again, there's going to be, I think, 3 games I'm going to showcase here. And so as you're going to see, we just kind of go 2 TC. Since our opponent went for very quick warrior scouts, he kind of delayed his own castle age by a bit. But you're going to see he's going up at about the same time as me, which is obviously good for me because I'm on 2 TC and he's not. Ideally, I think what he should have done this game is he should have gone for just straight fast castle and tried to steal as many relics as possible. But again, that's not what I'm trying to showcase here. So I do think you should always go up with the Regnants. I don't think going up with the Burgrave is worth it. personally, I think getting the relics, even if you can only get 2, is still 360 gold per 320 gold per minute, excuse me, which I think is worth more than the Burgrave, because with this 2 TC build, you actually get wood pretty quickly, and you can start throwing down a lot of production buildings. And then when your opponent does go for this Farimba, which is what makes this fast castle so strong, and they're pumping out units, it still does take a bit of time, and they're making infantry units, right? So their units do take a while to get across the map, so you should have more than enough time to make archery ranges and knights and whatever you're planning on doing. In this game, I do start out horsemen, but I actually think I made a mistake doing that. I think I should have started out with knights and added horsemen later, because I don't think horsemen are really that beneficial right now, because my opponent is going Donzos, and horsemen just absolutely melt the Donzos. I mean, knights do to a degree, but not as hard as horsemen, right? So I think I should have started out knight archer and then gone into horsemen later on when a lot of Musafati and stuff take over the field. Well, so as you're going to see, my opponent is going to mainly go for Donzo, and he's going to go for poison archers instead of javelins, which again is another mistake, but he's also going pretty heavy on the Musafati, because to kind of give you guys perspective, most HRE players, and the reason why people say that this is a bad matchup for HRE is because HRE players usually go melee only infantry compositions, right? You know, men-at-arms, land snakes, knights. Those are pretty much the very basis, and usually men-at-arms is the main core component. And I think this is a bad mindset that a lot of HRE players are having in this matchup, because I do not think you should be playing HRE versus Malians the same way. There's no reason as HRE that you cannot go Knight Archer like every other civ in the game, and I think the best way to combat Malians, this fast castle Malian style, is Knight Archer, or at least Horseman Archer, at least having archers in general, just so you can, you know, kill the Musafati and the Donzos. They both die really quickly to archers, whereas obviously if you have men-at-arms, the Musafati crush it. So you're going to see here we're kind of getting pushed back, but he just doesn't have enough. He wasn't making enough javelins. He was making too many Musafati, because I think he was expecting heavier knights. Because again, that's what most HRE players do. They don't make archers, because HRE players in general are against archers, and I think that's a very bad mindset to have, that just because you're HRE doesn't mean you can't make archers. Archers for HRE are just as strong as every other civ except for English, and obviously the Zoogs from China. But as you're going to see, so we're kind of doing an archer, horseman, land snake composition. Land snakes absolutely destroy Musafati, and they also destroy Donzos. This is also kind of why I think I should actually be going knights instead of the horsemen here, because the land snakes with the archers will destroy the knight, you know, the units I can destroy counter the knights, you know, the Musafati / Donzos, and then the knights can just kind of crush the rest. But so as you're going to see, it's kind of the composition we go. What you do want to eventually do when when you've taken care of a lot of your opponent's Musafati warriors, that's when you start mixing in men-at-arms. You're not going to see it till later in this game, but once that unit's pretty much gone, you add in men-at-arms, because archers and javelin throwers don't do the best versus men-at-arms, especially when they have a good backbone. And again, as HRE, men-at-arms are still a very strong unit even against Malians. Just you don't want to do it when they have 29 Musafati warriors, because then you get completely destroyed. So then you're going to kind of see some micro mistakes for me, like leading like this. I shouldn't be fighting like this, but you can see his Musafati warriors are just kind of getting destroyed. My archers are just doing their job at taking everything else down. And then it just kind of goes from there. And again, I will be showcasing videos of people who are doing the javelin throwers later on in this video. This is just the approach I take as HRE, and I think the best way to play against Malians as HRE. I think archers are a very key component, because again, it does counter the Musafati and the Donzos. But you do want to start mixing in men-at-arms and knights once those Musafati go away. And honestly, there's not really too much else to talk about in this game. This just kind of ends up going with me being in a pretty good position, and it just takes me a while to kill him because I switched to Men at Arms a bit later when I think I should be switching now, especially since I have so much gold. Once you're starting to float gold, you can add, Men at Arms plus some Musafati, or sorry, and Land Snakes, plus Horsemen, and then I don't need to make any more archers. I already have 42. I don't really need to be making more archers, though I do keep making them in this game for a while. But I think I should have stopped making archers at this point and just gone more heavier on men-at-arms, horsemen, and then the land snakes because I have more than enough archers to deal with Donzos and Musafati, right? And then so we're just going to see at this point, he can't really break me. I have a keep here. He could go around here, but he's never going to really do a lot of damage. His army's not that much bigger than mine, though he does take a good fight here. But this keep is really keeping me safe. He ends up getting a keep here, and then this kind of just goes on. So we're just going to fast forward to kind of the rest. Another thing you could do if he was going to do Sofa like Javelin or something, you can just make a bunch of spearmen with like knights and whatnot, and you would crush it as well. But yeah, so you're going to see we just have a good fight here. Took out most of his army, forcing him to go back. And the weakness to the Malian playstyle of doing this fast castle build is that if you can hold it off, especially as HRE with 2 TCs and 3 relics, even 2 relics, let's say I only had 2 relics, if you can just hold off that aggression and make sure that they don't get keeps on all the sacred sites, which you should be able to at least keep one sacred site from doing that, I really don't think this matchup is that bad. I'm not saying I'm right on this, by the way. This is just my opinion. Again, I just want to keep reiterating that. I know some other top players think this matchup is very, very bad for HRE. But I think I just kind of disagree because I see them playing this typical HRE style instead of adding in archers, which I think is necessary against Malians as any civ, pretty much. Because you need a way to kill the Donzos and Musafati and then having your knights do that. Now, another thing you can do is I could have gone more spear heavy with land snakes and men-at-arms as well, and then add in a few mangonels instead, right? If I have 3 mangonels versus javelin Musafati, as long as I have a scout nearby so that he can't just sneak up on my mangonels, mangonels will also destroy this army with proper support. I haven't messed with it too much, but I do think that in my head that works that way, but again, I could be wrong. But because they will deal very well against the javelin throwers. And then this game just kind of gets drawn out because he got that keep up, and I just have to kind of, and you're going to see I have started adding men-at-arms. We just have to get some trebuchets, and really there's not much else to go over. This game does end up winning in this style. So again, this is just what I think is best in this specific matchup. With every other matchup, I think, like, for example, as English, I think Longbow Knight is the best counter. As China, I think either going Zugunu Spear Nest of Bees or Spear Nest of Bees Knights or something like that is also very good against the Fast Castle Farimba stuff. It doesn't hurt to get some walls as well if you need to buy some time. Towers can also help while you're waiting to get your tech or your economy managed, whatever it is. And so this is just one game I am. Unfortunately, the other replay I have, you can only look at the other YouTube video I have, so I'm going to go over another person's play. You're going to find out here in a moment. It'll probably be a different matchup, but it'll showcase the same way on how to beat the Malian playstyle. All right, the second recording I'm going to show you is going to be Mongols versus Malians, and this is going to be Flash versus Zalami himself. This is going to showcase a different way to do it. What Flash does in this game, and he's, I believe, top 20, top 30 player, last I saw, is he goes for, he's going to do the typical tower stuff, but the way Zalami counters that is with his own barracks and then his own spears. So the towers never really become a factor, but it's the mid game that's interesting how he goes about it. So while I talked about going archers like Archer Knight, what he ends up doing is he actually does a heavier focus on crossbows, which they do well versus a lot of the stuff. Like they have a high base damage, and it ends up working out pretty well, even against Musafati, which I don't think Musafati are armored at all, but I can't remember the statistics. So again, we're just going to skip forward because again, I'm not going over specific build orders. I'm just going over showcasing how this can be defeated. So we're going to see a Spearman Rush from Flash, a counter Donzo from Zalami, so that, you know, he's going to put on some pressure, and then they're going to advance. So there's not too much to talk about here, right? This is just kind of really, I'm not going to say this is necessarily standard Malian versus Mongols. I know some Malian players just allow the tower rush to happen and react to that. But I think Zalami's way of dealing with it's also really nice, because then he keeps all his gold safe, his pit mine safe, more specifically, and Donzo's in general. Um, Actually, you know, I just learned something new in this one, and I'm not the most professional video, but in Spear versus Donzo, I mean, Donzo loses except they can throw the spear, but it looks like Spearmen do work. Anyway, sorry, a little distraction on this video. But yeah, so you're going to see a couple here, because again, this forces a reaction. Zalami would love to just go fast castle, but you can't really do that against like this, because if he does, he's going to lose his pit mine. Then he'll go over here and probably deny the gold here, and in general, just kind of put on some pain. So we're not going to worry about that, because again, a lot of the people that I'm seeing that are saying this is broken is they're talking specifically about the Farimba, even though in honesty it's the only reason right now that Malians are starting to do good is because of the Farimba. Personally, I don't actually think it's overpowered. I think it's just new and people don't know how to counter it, but as people are getting better and better at countering it, we're seeing it's not as OP as people are saying, at least at the high level. Because some people think it's absolutely broken, but not going to call anyone out because maybe they're right and I'm wrong, right? Who knows? Again, it's just an opinion. So anyway, we're going to see Flash is doing very standard things. He's not doing anything unusual with Mongols. But now here's where you're going to see kind of a difference. So he's going to go Knights. He's going to go Men-at-Arms as well, because again, Men-at-Arms are mainly against the Donzo Javelin. Because there's no Musafati, so getting Knights and Men-at-Arms is all you need to crush this. But you're going to see an archer, but then he's going to switch into mass crossbow, and crossbow ends up being Flash's main unit composition. Again, with knights, and I think he adds in siege later. But so we're just going to see this push back. Zalami's advancing to castle as well. And then, again, as like a good Mongol player, he's getting the relics. And then as you can see, he's starting to mix in the crossbows, and it's only going to increase. You're going to see the Musafati, you know, kind of they kill some knights, but end up getting pushed back. But again, that's not the point, so we're just going to keep going forward. You're going to see that Zalami, I believe, gets 2 relics, or maybe he only gets 1. But so the main composition, for those unaware, I haven't talked about this yet, and what the Malians does is most of their villagers do go on gold, because the Farimba is what they need. It's only gold to make the units, and then they don't have to worry about food. So we're just going to fast forward. You're just going to see more and more crossbows. And again, I do like the concept of men-at-arms crossbow or men-at-arms archer. As I said in the last recording, it's just you do want to have armored units, because if you take care of the Musafati warriors, the armored units become very, very valuable. But you just need that backbone to be able to kill the Musafati warriors. Otherwise, your armored units will get demolished. And then so we're just going to keep going. He's getting his blacksmith upgrades, getting heavy blacksmith. And so as you can see, like, this is why you see that he has 16 Musafati warriors, much like in the last replay. This is a very common thing that Malian players do, is they do start out heavy Musafati, because a lot of players, and again, he did see knights and men-at-arms, do go heavy on that composition. But you're also going to see that he's adding in the mangonel. And this is because of the javelin throwers. I think the mangonel is underutilized in general sometimes. Like, sometimes I think players forget that this is actually a pretty good landmark. And, or not landmark, unit is the mangonel. And the mangonel will destroy the javelin thrower. You just need to be able to protect the mangonel from the Musafati warriors. The best way to do that, have a scout nearby at all times so that Musafati warriors can't go invisible and snipe it. That's the main key factor right there. So you need either a tower or a scout nearby at all times. So as you're going to see, we just kind of hold it. And just to kind of show Zalami's perspective, he's at 57 villagers, 22 military. And then Flash is at 25 military, 64 villagers. Again, we do expect a a build lead for Mongols, and Mongols does have 3 relics, but Zalami does have uh, 2 sacred sites, a relic, and of course the pit mines. He has 3 pit mines, getting about 90 to 100 gold per minute, and then villagers on them, so that he can keep pumping from this beautiful landmark. And so we're just going to keep going forward. Again, I'm just showcasing exactly how strong this is. You're going to see that Zalami is going to try to raid. He's going to decap the sacred site, I would assume. It can be a little difficult to raid Mongols, right? Because they almost always have towers nearby, plus town centers. It's just very, very difficult to actually do damage with raids, but it never hurts to try. And you're going to see he's still going knights, because again, knights are very, very strong. I just can't emphasize that enough. And then he's doing heavy crossbows. He does have a decent, 10 archers, but 18 crossbows and then 2 mangonels. The concern here is obviously Springolds that Zalami's doing. The nice thing about Mongols is if you get the build research tech for your siege, then you can just build Springolds, mangonels, and then I think you just hold this pretty easily. I think this is actually a pretty good matchup for Mongols, and in general, I think this might even be a counter to Malians. I don't know how players at the high level are thinking about that right now. I just know I think Mongols are a pretty good counter to this strategy in general, and I think this is just going to perfectly show why. We're going to see that the 2TC is really starting to come in, but we're going to notice they're still even in military, right? 74 for Zalami and 80 for Mongols, but Mongols has those 2 mangonels. He did lose a lot of all his armored units, but look how fast these Musafati die. They do not do well against ranged units. A ranged mass will just destroy them. Now we have more knights, more crossbows coming in, and then it just absolutely and the mangonels, and it just destroys the composition there. Now again, I want to state, I'm not saying either player plays perfectly, but then again, no player ever does. So I know people could say, well, if he just did this, this, or this, he would have won. Well, I just want to state for the record, you can do that for the other side too. So this is just to kind of showcase how to beat this style of play. And again, I am going to show another recording. This is not the only one I'm going to show. These aren't the only 2 I'm going to show. I'm going to try to find another. I think I have another I can find. But if not, maybe it will be just these 2. And then, I mean, this game's over. There's not really too much else to talk about here. We see Flash at 170 pop, 53 military to 83. This game's not really much else to talk about. And Warrior Scouts are just going to get destroyed. They're not going to do much, especially since we have knights or spears in the mix, and we're just going to see this army get destroyed, and then it's kind of GG from there. Now, this is just another showcasing of how to counter it with units and strategy. And I think in general, like I said, you want to go a range composition. I don't know how much I like the pure crossbow that he did, but I also don't know if I don't like it. It actually did very well. It destroyed a lot of the Musafati, and it would destroy the sofas. So unless there's like a lot of sofas, but in general, you don't see a ton of sofas from Malian players when doing this strategy, and the reason being is because they don't generally have the food income for it. They're usually relying on this landmark to get those 5 units for the gold only, and so they don't generally have the food to make sofas. Because sofas are 120 food, and if you don't have a food economy set up, like Zalami does have 22 on food, but which actually is pretty equal to what Mongols had. But a lot of times I've seen this strategy used. Malian players neglect food a lot, and just so they can't afford it. So usually the sofa switch isn't a threat. Still something to be aware of, as you never know. And yeah, so I think that's about all I can think of to talk up in this specific matchup. I'll try to get you guys at least one more to showcase later on, and then we will, and then that should be it. All right, and I have another game for you guys here. This one's going to be Delhi versus Malians again, and again, it's going to be Zalami showcasing. Again, he's the pioneer of the build. What better replay to show than one of him, right? He's against a player called Big Noob, who is actually Puppy Paw. So we're going to see, again, kind of showcasing again what I've been talking about in general through this series, Men-at-Arm, Knight, Archer as a composition to beat Delhi, or to beat Malians. That composition. So we're just going to fast forward here because, again, if you want build orders, that's not what this video is intended to teach. I probably said that too many times in this video because I'm too used to streaming on Twitch where I repeat myself a lot. So I apologize to those who are like, okay, Blade, shut up. We get it. We know what you're trying to say. That being said, what we're going to see Puppy do here is he's going to take all 3 sacred sites at the same time while Malians is going for that fast castle build. And one thing to note is the fast castle build. If you ever in general as Delhi, if you know your opponent's going fast castle, you should go for all 3 sacred sites at the same time. In general, in this matchup, I would almost always go with all 3 sacred sites at the same time regardless, because the way Malian players play is they don't go cavalry, right? It's always a javelin, Donzo composition or with Musafati, so it's a slow composition. So even if the Malian player goes to fight this sacred site, for example, he can't be here and here at the same time. I mean, he could send small units, but you generally, what you're going to see from Puppy here, he's going to go Archer Horseman. So if that were to happen, he just sends the Horseman to where he needs to be to clean it up and grab that sacred site. So we're just going to fast forward and we're just going to see walling in the sacred sites, which again is a smart move. You should always do this as Delhi regardless of matchup if you can. We're seeing that Zalami is going that very quick Farimba garrison. And you're going to notice something here. While Puppy is making units, he isn't making, he's going to stop here, as you're going to see. He makes like 1 more horseman and then kind of just stops unit production. If we look at his military, just to kind of showcase, he's only got 4 archers and 8 horsemen. He correctly recognized the fast castle build that Zalami is doing. And when you recognize that as Delhi, you don't have to make as many units. You're not fighting for the sacred sites. He's giving you the sacred sites. So he's taking the sacred sites, and then he's just going to go castle himself. And you can see he just has a few too many villagers there that he's canceling to get castle. And then the composition he's going to go for is Men-at-Arm, Knight, Archer, which I think is, again, the best composition against this. I know I'm repeating myself, and I know I'm probably annoying you guys with that, but I just want to showcase that for the players who think that it's just not that's not a counter. For example, it's strong. This build is strong, but I think once people kind of realize the unit composition of responses, you're going to see. I would not be surprised if Malians kind of are just seen as okay instead of super strong as they are right now. Again, at the high level, at low level, it might be different. But so you're going to see we have 3 sacred sites, two walled in. Knights coming out. We're continuing archer production, and then we're building a couple barracks because, again, for those men-at-arms. And you're going to notice Donzo Archer from Zalami here, which, while the Donzos do well against the Knights, they don't do as well against the Archers, or sorry, not against the Archers, against the men-at-arms. So we're just going to kind of fast forward a little bit. He's taking control of the sacred sites. And then we got 4 relics. Again, it's very hard to stop Delhi from getting a bunch of relics, even if you get castle first, unless you have your own. We see some raiding attempts. But again, usually you're not going to ever be able to raid a Malian player until their initial gold mine runs out, because they usually make this tower landmark, the trade network, so that it protects their gold from raids and whatnot. But once this kind of runs out, you might be able to start raiding, like over here if there was no wall, or over here if he decides to go over there. So we're going to see that, and this is the strength of the build. I'm going to pause it here just to kind of showcase this, is even though Puppy had units beforehand, is Castle Age and all that, what makes this so strong is because you can just see the military count, right? We're at 53 military, 43 villagers, to 47 villagers and 42 military. So the military count is in favor of the Malian player, and this is pretty typical, especially in the early stages of Castle, because this landmark just pays off so well when you pay this gold, because you get 5 units at a time. It comes fairly quickly, and again, you're only paying gold, so you don't have to worry about gathering food or wood for it. You just need to make sure you have houses. So that's what makes this so strong. But again, the longer the game goes on, the worse this kind of gets, because as long as you're not behind economically as the Delhi player would, or for example, you're just going to end up outscaling as you're pumping out from 6+ military production ability at the same time, and then the Malian player, kind of has to slows down a little bit. But again, you're going to see the spike goes kind of badly for the Delhi player. He went a little too heavy on the, didn't have enough archers, so he did lose the first fight, but there's just not enough here from Zalami to keep going. Delhi production is pretty insane itself, and then with scholars makes it even better. So we're going to see this army get cleaned up. And again, we're seeing 12 men-at-arms. We're still seeing a good amount of knights. Knights are still being, well, they aren't being created anymore. I'm a liar. And then you're just seeing a bunch of archers because archers are the key component. Regardless of any civ you play, you want to make sure you're getting archers, or if you're English, longbows, because it just deals with the Musafati and the Donzos, which are the main threat. The javelin throwers themselves, for example, are not the threat. The archers are not the main threat. It's the Musafati and the Donzos, because those are what will stop your units from killing the javelins or the Malian archers. So that's why you're going to kind of see. And again, we do still have knight production coming in. We just have a 26 men-at-arms, 27 archers, and 29 Musafati and 11 archers, right? So we got a lot of Musafati warriors, but they're going to kind of melt to the archers. And then you're going to see a mangonel. Again, you just have to add some siege yourself, and this only helps beat this even quicker. As long as you defend your siege, you're just going to kind of destroy the composition here. And we'll just kind of let you see this fight to kind of showcase. So before the fight truly gets started, 44 Musafati, 11 archers, 4 sofas versus 31 men-at-arms, 35 archers, and a mangonel and 2 knights. Musafati, that's a lot of Musafati, but this is where the weakness comes in. 35 archers is going to make short work of those because they have the men-at-arms to tank as well. And of course, scholars are also pretty good. We do see 64 military for the Malians and then 100 for Delhi because Delhi's just in such a good spot. I don't actually know. Like, honestly, I'm not too surprised to see this kind of be so good for Delhi. I wouldn't be surprised if this matchup is Delhi favored, just because if you do this fast castle style and Delhi recognizes it, they should be able to grab relics plus the sacred sites, at minimum sacred sites and some relics, and get to castle shortly after themselves. Because it just takes too much time to get the mass here before your opponent can capitalize on it, in my opinion, because of how slow the army moves. You can raid and all that, but it still takes time to get a sizable force to like kill your opponent. And then you're just going to kind of see Musafati are absolutely destroying the men-at-arms, but the archers are just cleaning up the Musafati warriors. We're still at 20 men-at-arms. The archers are dead. And the game's over there. The armor just got shredded. And so that's what I kind of think you want to do. You just want to get that strong composition with archers, men-at-arms, maybe some knights, and then mangonels. And you should be able to combat this style of gameplay with any civilization in the game. I think that'll be it for this video. I think going over 3 replays is perfect. I think this showcases the unit compositions to go. Again, these are just my opinions on how you should do it, and from what I'm seeing, I'm not saying Zalami didn't make mistakes. I'm not saying Delhi didn't make mistakes or anything like that. In any of these games, you could go, hey, if the Malian player did this, or if the other player did this, and this happens. You can always play what ifs. But this is just to showcase it. I hope this helped you if you've been struggling against this Malian game playstyle. If you have further questions, feel free to ask in the comments below. Or feel free to watch me live at twitch.tv/played55555. Thanks for watching and hope you enjoyed.